If you're trying to get higher yielding soybeans on your farm, did you know that you can really increase your yield if you can just make the size of your soybean seed just a fraction bigger? They only have to be a tiny little bit bigger each and every seed, and you've got a lot more bushels.
Well, when you think about how many plants per acre are out there in your soybean crop, it's typically 100,000 or 150,000 plants per acre final stand for many farmers. And when you think about how many pods are on each plant and how many beans are in each pod, it starts to make sense that, wow, if my beans are just a little bit bigger, it's going to add up to bushel after bushel after bushel. So the question is, how do you get those bigger soybeans on your farm?
Well, there are a lot of things you can do. It starts with planting your seed early, with having better drainage, getting some tiling done on your farm. And one of the biggest things that I think most farmers all around the country neglect is you need a lot of P and K, a lot of fertility, a lot of micronutrient, well, I shouldn't say a lot of micronutrients, a few micronutrients, but that P and K thing, that's one of the biggest things. I mean, on our farm, if we pull out a 60 bushel soybean crop, you think, well, yeah, I'll throw some more fertilizer out there. But do you realize how much a 60 bushel soybean crop really removes from the field?
It's 48 pounds of P and 84 pounds of K. And for many farmers...
that's just for the grain only. That's not counting the stover. That's figuring you leave all the stover still out there. If all you do is pull that 60 bushel soybean crop off the field and just take the grain, you've removed 48 pounds of phosphate and 84 pounds of K2O potassium. That's a lot.
For at least 50% of the farmers in the country, they're relying on, well, I'm going to have carryover fertilizer from my previous crop and my soybeans will just mine it out.
Yeah.
There's not 84 pounds of K carryover from your last crop. There isn't, because our corn yields have been going up, and typically in our corn and soybean rotation, we're using up all the fertility in our corn. There's nothing left for the soybeans if you aren't going to put that fertilizer out.
So that's probably the biggest thing that we could advise you to do. If you want bigger soybeans, you have to have fertility out there. If you don't properly feed the plant, obviously it's not going to reach its maximum size. That is a big deal. And the micronutrient thing too. I mean, how many farmers in the United States actually put micronutrients on their soybeans? I'll bet it's less than 10%.
We're typically seeing a 3 to 6 bushel gain by putting micronutrients on soybeans. Now, when you hear that, I know how it is. I mean, I would hear that and I'd say, well, wait a minute, 6 bushels I'm going to gain. No, you're probably going to gain about 3. But if you haven't been putting micros on at all and your ground is short, you'll probably see a bigger gain than that. So micros will give you a big gain. Other things that you can do, it really starts with genetic selection. When you're selecting a variety of soybeans, just like in corn, a lot of times the breeders know, when we raise this particular hybrid, we get more rounds than flats. With soybeans, the breeders know as well, this variety typically throws a little bit bigger soybean seed. So it may start with looking for big soybean seed at the beginning and say, what are some varieties that have great big seed this year? I want to plant some of those because they're typically the ones that are going to have bigger seed with the next harvest as well.
Well, starting by just putting that seed in the ground, you want to use a good seed treatment, something like the new Innovate that is systemic through the plant, that's going to not only control diseases right at planting time, but also insects. That is a big deal. You have to have your weeds under control. You want to do the very best job post-emerge with any insects that show up later on, like soybean aphids or bean leaf beetles or grasshoppers. All those things, anytime they're feeding on that plant, they're going to open the plant up. It's going to be more likely to get disease. You have crop injury, and you're much less likely to have big seeded soybeans.
Now, one of the other things that you kind of left out there, and we're talking about seed treatments, there's one product we've been using on our farm. It's called Quick Rits. It's a bacteria and a fungi combination that are beneficial for the plant. They help the plant explore a greater volume of soil and bring more nutrients in. We've seen it doing the plant tissue testing that we're doing. We're getting more nutrients in, not changing anything in the fertility program, just comparing where we're using Quick Rits and where we're not. So you may consider a biological product like Quick Rits as another way to help you improve the fertility that your plant's getting in. Once you get that fertility in, you have to protect your plant from diseases. And foliar leaf diseases in soybeans are a bigger deal than people were giving them credit for just a few years ago. Now, many farmers across the country are starting to see, even in the western corn belt, we're seeing pretty good gains using a fungicide on soybeans on certain years. Well, this year was a big one. Many of the early trials coming out were showing 4 to 5 bushel gains using some fungicide post-emerge in soybeans. Typically, we're only seeing 1.5 bushels or 2, but even there, if you can keep those leaves healthy so they can bring in more sunlight energy to the plant, you're going to have bigger seeds.
Well, once again, having bigger seeded soybeans is a key to higher yields. There are many management steps you can use on your farm to get those bigger seeded soybeans.
The management tips will also be useful for controlling our weed of the week. We'll show you how coming up next.